In the windswept cliffs of 1938, Cornwall, a radio operator is found dead. A cryptic signal, Z13QX7, scrawled in his final moments. Hercule Poirot, master of mysteries, unravels a web of deceit where a nervous colleague, a ruthless rival, and a shadowy linguist hide secrets of espionage and betrayal. A poisoned needle, a locked cabin, and a phantom signal lead to a chilling truth. Someone killed to silence a secret that could shake the nation. Can Poirot's grey cells outwit a cunning spy before the signal fades forever? Chapter 1. The Silent Cabin. The autumn wind howled across the deck of the steamer Cornish Star, cutting through Hercule Poirot's overcoat as he stood at the rail, his gloved hands gripping the brim of his hat. It was October 1938, and the English Channel was a restless expanse of slate-grey waves, flecked with foam under a sky heavy with impending rain. Poirot, ever fastidious, adjusted his scarf against the chill, his moustache quivering slightly at the assault of the briny air. He had been summoned from London by a terse telegram from his old friend, Inspector Japp of Scotland Yard, who was stationed temporarily in the remote Cornish village of St. Albans. The message had been uncharacteristically cryptic. Death at naval radio station. Most peculiar. Your presence required urgently. Japp, Poirot's grey cells, as he liked to call them, were already stirring with curiosity. A death, peculiar in nature, at a naval outpost? The combination hinted at intrigue, and Poirot, though fond of the comforts of his London flat, could not resist the lure of a puzzle. As the steamer churned toward the rugged Cornish coast, he contemplated the sparse details Japp had provided in a follow-up letter. Alfred Morse, a radio operator of 20 years' experience, found dead in his locked cabin, a strange signal scrawled on a notepad beside him. No wounds, no signs of violence, only the enigmatic code, Z13QX7. The dock at St. Albans was a weathered affair, its timbers creaking under the weight of the sea's relentless battering. Inspector Japp awaited Poirot, his familiar bowler hat tilted against the wind, his face etched with a mixture of relief and agitation. "Poirot, you're a sight for sore eyes," he said, shaking the detective's hand with vigor. "This business has me stumped, and that's not a word I use lightly." As they climbed into a rattling police car, Japp recounted the facts with his usual briskness. Alfred Morse, 42, found yesterday morning by his colleague, slumped over his radio set, stiff as a board. The local doctor says heart failure, but I'm not convinced. The man was fit, no history of illness. And then there's that blasted signal, Z13QX7. Means nothing to the Navy boys, but Morse wrote it down like it was his last act. The car wound along a narrow road that hugged the cliffs, the sea crashing far below. Poirot's eyes, sharp despite the gloom, took in the desolate beauty of the landscape, gnarled trees bent by the wind, gulls wheeling overhead, and the distant silhouette of the naval radio station, a squat stone building perched precariously at the cliff's edge. Its single tower, bristling with antennas, stood like a sentinel against the stormy sky. "A lonely place, n'est-ce pas?" Poirot murmured. Japp grunted. "Lonely and full of secrets, I'll wager." The station itself was a study in austerity. Its thick walls, built to withstand both weather and enemy scrutiny, housed a small complex of rooms, a common area, a mess hall, and the radio cabin where Morse had met his end. Japp led Poirot to the cabin, a small windowless chamber lit by a single bulb. The air was stale, tinged with the metallic scent of machinery. At the center stood a desk cluttered with dials, switches, and a bulky radio receiver, its headphones draped carelessly over the back of a chair. Morse's body had been removed, but the scene remained untouched, per Japp's orders. Poirot's gaze fell upon the notepad, its top sheet bearing the fateful signal in Morse's neat, deliberate hand. Zoo 13, Quack 7. He traced a gloved finger over the letters, his mind already sifting through possibilities. This code, Inspector, it is not a mere scribble. It has purpose, intention. But what? He examined the room with meticulous care, noting the absence of forced entry. The door's lock, a simple bolt, was intact, and the key had been found in Morse's pocket. A logbook lay open on the desk, its final entry dated the night of his death, recording routine shipping frequencies. Yet the signal on the notepad matched nothing in the log. Japp shifted impatiently. The Navy chaps say it's no code they use. Could be a mistake, something he jotted down in a daze. Poirot's eyes twinkled. A mistake, mon ami? No, no. A man doesn't write with such precision in his final moments, unless driven by necessity. This signal, it is a message or a warning. He bent closer, inspecting the desk's surface. A faint smudge of ink caught his eye, as if Morse's pen had slipped. He was interrupted, perhaps, Poirot mused. But by whom? Or what? Outside, the wind moaned, and Poirot's thoughts turned to the isolation of the station. St. Albans was a small village, its inhabitants bound by the rhythms of the sea, yet this death suggested currents far deeper than the tides. Who had access to this cabin? He asked. Japp ticked off the names on his fingers. Leonard Graves, Morse's colleague, nervous sort, works the day shift. Margaret Vale runs a rival commercial station inland, prickly as a hedgehog. And Victor Henshaw, a linguist staying in the village, bit of an odd fish. Says he's studying local dialects, but I've my doubts. Poirot nodded, committing the names to memory. And their relations with Monsieur Morse? Japp shrugged. Graves worked with him, didn't always see eye to eye. Vale resented Morse's set-up. Navy funding gave him better gear. Henshaw's a mystery, claims he barely knew the man, but he's been seen poking about the cliffs at night. Poirot's moustache twitched. 3 suspects, 3 motives perhaps. We shall see. As they left the cabin, Poirot paused at the cliff's edge, gazing out at the churning sea. The station's isolation was both its strength and its vulnerability, a perfect stage for secrets. And for murder. This signal, Inspector, he said softly. It is the key. It speaks of something hidden, something worth killing for. Hercule Poirot will find it, bien sûr. Japp clapped him on the shoulder. I knew you'd take to it, Poirot. Now, let's get you settled at the inn. This storm's only getting started. Chapter 2. The 3 suspects. The wind had not relented as Hercule Poirot and Inspector Japp made their way from the naval radio station to the village of St. Albans, a cluster of stone cottages huddled against the Cornish cliffs like barnacles clinging to a ship's hull. The storm clouds, heavy with the promise of rain, cast a pall over the landscape, and the sea below roared with a restless fury. Poirot, seated in the passenger seat of Japp's rattling police car, adjusted his scarf and tilted his head against the chill seeping through the window. His mind, however, was far from the discomforts of the journey. It was already weaving through the threads of the mystery that had brought him to this desolate corner of England. The cryptic signal, ZEED 13, QX7, scrawled in Alfred Morse's final moments, was a tantalizing enigma, a whisper from the grave that Poirot was determined to decipher. Japp, gripping the steering wheel as the car jostled along the uneven road, broke the silence. "I've set up a meeting with the three who had access to the station, Poirot. Thought you'd want to size them up yourself. They're a rum lot, if you ask me, each with their own quirks, and not one of 'em shedding tears for Morse." Poirot's eyes, sharp as cut glass, flickered with interest. "Bon, Inspector. The human heart, it reveals itself in the smallest gestures, the unguarded words. Let us observe these three, and we shall see what lies beneath their masks." The car pulled up outside the Fisherman's Rest, a weathered inn at the heart of St. Albans, its sign creaking in the wind. The common room was a warm contrast to the bleak outdoors, with a fire crackling in the hearth and the scent of pipe smoke mingling with the tang of ale. Japp had arranged for the suspects to gather here, away from the prying eyes of the village. As Poirot entered, his impeccable suit and polished shoes drawing curious glances from the locals at the bar, he took in the scene with a practiced eye. 3 figures sat at a table in the corner, their postures betraying varying degrees of unease. Japp gestured toward them. "There they are, Poirot. Let's get to it." Poirot approached, his step deliberate, his expression one of polite curiosity, tempered by an unyielding scrutiny. He removed his hat, revealing a head of sleek, dark hair, and inclined it slightly in greeting. "Messieurs, Madame, I am Hercule Poirot, called upon by Inspector Japp to assist in the matter of Monsieur Alfred Morse's untimely death. I thank you for your presence." His voice, with its precise continental inflection, carried a quiet authority that silenced the murmurs in the room. He seated himself, his small, neat hands folded on the table, and studied the trio before him. First was Leonard Graves, a wiry man in his late 30s, with thinning hair and fingers stained with ink from years of scribbling radio logs. His eyes darted nervously, as if expecting an accusation to leap from the shadows. He wore a faded navy jumper, its cuffs frayed, and his hands fidgeted with a pencil, tapping it against the table in an irregular rhythm. Next was Margaret Vale, a woman of perhaps 35, with a sharp jaw and hair pulled tightly into a bun, giving her the air of a schoolmistress poised to reprimand. Her dark eyes met Poirot's without flinching, but there was a tautness to her posture, a coiled energy that suggested defiance. Last was Victor Henshaw, a lean figure in his early 40s, with a scholar's stoop and a face that might have been handsome were it not for its guarded expression. His grey suit was impeccably tailored, yet his fingers toyed with a silver cigarette case, betraying a subtle tension. Japp cleared his throat. "Right then, let's have your stories, one at a time. Mr. Graves, you first." Leonard Graves started, the pencil slipping from his grasp and rolling across the table. He retrieved it hastily, his cheeks flushing. I don't know what you want me to say, Inspector. I worked with Alfred, that's all. Day shifts, mostly. He took the nights. We didn't always get on, but there was no bad blood, not really." His voice was high, almost plaintive, and he glanced at Poirot as if seeking rescue. "He was a good operator. Better than me, I'll admit. Always at that radio, listening to static like it was music. Said he heard things. Patterns, he called them. I thought he was daft." Poirot leaned forward, his gaze fixed on Graves. "And these patterns, Monsieur Graves, did he share their nature with you? Did he speak of this signal, Z13, QX07? Graves shook his head, his fingers tightening around the pencil. "No, sir. He got secretive the last few weeks, kept his logbook close, locked the cabin when he wasn't there. I asked him once what he was chasing, and he just laughed, said it was bigger than the Navy. I didn't press him. Thought he was losing it, to be honest. Poirot noted the tremor in Graves's voice, the way his eyes avoided the others. Fear, perhaps, or guilt. But of what? Japp turned to Margaret Vale, whose lips curled into a faint, sardonic smile. "Miss Vale, you run the whole commercial station up the hill. What was your connection to Morse?" Margaret straightened, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Connection? Hardly. Alfred Morse was a thorn in my side, Inspector. His station got all the Navy's money, new equipment, priority frequencies, while my outfit scraped by with second-hand gear. He'd come by sometimes, gloating about his signal range, offering advice I didn't ask for. Her voice dripped with disdain, but Poirot detected a flicker of something else. Resentment, yes, but also a grudging respect. Did I like him? Number, did I kill him? Don't be absurd. I was at my station the night he died, working late. No one to confirm it, but that's the truth. Poirot tilted his head, his eyes narrowing. And yet, madame, you were not so distant from Monsieur Morse as you claim. Your station monitors his frequencies, does it not? Margaret's smile faltered, but she recovered quickly. It's my job to keep tabs on competitors, Monsieur Poirot. We pick up what we can. Shipping signals, mostly. Morse's station was louder than most, so yes, we heard him. Doesn't mean I was sneaking into his cabin. Poirot made a mental note of her defensiveness, the way her fingers tightened until the knuckles whitened. She was hiding something, but whether it was murder or merely professional jealousy, he could not yet say. Finally, Japp turned to Victor Henshaw, who had remained silent, his cigarette case now closed and resting on the table. "Mr. Henshaw, you're a bit of a mystery. A linguist, you say, studying dialects in St. Albans. Care to explain what brings you to a naval radio station?" Henshaw's smile was thin, almost reptilian. "I study languages, Inspector, and signals are a form of language, are they not? The patterns of radio transmissions fascinate me. Codes, ciphers, the rhythm of static. Morse's work was intriguing. I never met him, but I'd hear his signals from the cliffs where I walk to clear my mind." His voice was smooth, measured, but Poirot noted the careful choice of words, the way his eyes remained fixed on Japp, avoiding Poirot's gaze. "And these walks, Monsieur Henshaw," Poirot interjected. "They took you near the station on the night of Monsieur Morse's death." Henshaw's fingers paused on the cigarette case, a fleeting hesitation. "I walk most nights, Monsieur Poirot. The cliffs are public land. If I passed the station, I didn't enter. I had no reason to." His tone was calm, but Poirot sensed a steel beneath it, a man accustomed to guarding his thoughts. A villager's report, mentioned by Japp earlier, placed a man matching Henshaw's description near the station after dark. But Poirot kept this to himself for now, letting the silence stretch. The inn's fire crackled, and the locals at the bar had fallen quiet, eavesdropping shamelessly. Poirot rose, his movements deliberate, and paced a few steps, his hands clasped behind, his back. "Messieurs, madame, you each had opportunity. The station's lock, it is a simple thing, easily bypassed. The path along the cliffs, it is discreet, hidden from the village. But motive, that is what eludes us. Monsieur Morse was not a man without enemies, it seems. His secrets, his signals, They stirred something dangerous. He paused, his eyes sweeping over the trio. Graves flinched, Margaret's jaw tightened, and Henshaw's expression remained unreadable. Japp, sensing the tension, stood as well. "Right, that's enough for now. You're to stay in the village, all of you, until we've got this sorted. Poirot, any questions?" Poirot smiled faintly, his moustache twitching. "Only one, Inspector. Monsieur Graves, Madame Vale, Monsieur Henshaw, did any of you notice anything unusual about Monsieur Morse in the days before his death? A change in his habits, perhaps?" Graves hesitated, then spoke. "He was jumpy, like I said. Kept muttering about catching the phantom. I thought he meant ghosts." Margaret shrugged. "He was smug as ever when I saw him last. No change there." Henshaw's response was curt. "I wouldn't know. I didn't know the man." Poirot nodded, dismissing them with a courteous bow. As the suspects filed out, he turned to Japp. "Each tells a truth, Inspector, but not the whole truth. Monsieur Graves fears something. Perhaps what he knows of Morse's work. Madame Vale, she is ambitious, and ambition can breed desperation. And Monsieur Henshaw, his detachment, it is too perfect, too practiced." Japp rubbed his chin. "You think one of them did it?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "I think, mon ami, that the signal Z13, QX7 is the key to their secrets. We must learn what it means." After the meeting, Poirot lingered in the common room, sipping a tisane prepared by the inn's wary cook. He requested Japp to arrange a visit to the radio station the next morning to examine Morse's logbooks and equipment more closely. "The cabin, it is a stage," he said, "and every stage holds clues to the drama played upon it." Japp agreed, though his expression suggested he found Poirot's theatrical metaphors tiresome. As they parted for the night, Poirot retired to his room, a small but tidy chamber overlooking the sea. He sat at the window, the distant crash of waves a backdrop to his thoughts. The three suspects, he mused, were like pieces of a mosaic, each distinct yet part of a larger pattern. Graves, with his nervous tics and ink-stained fingers, seemed too timid for murder, yet his fear suggested knowledge he dared not share. Margaret Vale's sharp tongue and professional rivalry painted her as a woman scorned, but was her resentment deep enough to kill? And Henshaw, the enigmatic linguist, was a puzzle in himself. His interest in signals too convenient, his alibi too vague. Poirot's fingers drummed lightly on the windowsill. The signal Z13QK7 was no random jotting, was a message, perhaps a warning, and Morse had died to protect it or to conceal it. As the storm broke at last, rain lashing the inn's windows, Poirot's mind turned to the station's isolation, its vulnerability to those who moved in the shadows. The cliffs offered cover, the lock was no barrier, and Morse's obsession with his phantom suggested he had stumbled upon something perilous. Was it espionage, as the Home Office might suspect, or something more personal, rooted in the rivalries and secrets of St. Albans? Poirot's grey cells worked tirelessly, arranging the facts, testing their fit. He would need more from the logbooks, more from the village, more from the suspects themselves. Before retiring, he made a note to visit the local post office at dawn to inquire about Morse's mysterious telegrams to Mr. Black. The name, he suspected, was a cipher in itself, a thread leading to the heart of the mystery. As he extinguished the lamp, the darkness seemed to pulse with the rhythm of the sea, and with the echo of a signal that refused to be silenced. Chapter 3. The enigmatic code. The dawn broke over St. Albans with a grudging light, the storm of the previous night having retreated to a sullen drizzle that clung to the air like a damp veil. Hercule Poirot, ever punctual, rose early, his small frame impeccably clad in a charcoal suit, his moustache waxed to perfection despite the hour. The Fisherman's Rest was silent save for the creak of floorboards and the distant clatter of the inn's kitchen. Poirot's mind, however, was far from tranquil. The cryptic signal, 13QX7, danced before his eyes, a puzzle that demanded his full attention. He had resolved to visit the village post office before returning to the naval radio station, seeking traces of Alfred Morse's mysterious telegrams to Mr. Black. But first, a tisane to fortify the grey cells, which he sipped thoughtfully by the inn's fogged window, watching the grey sea churn below the cliffs. The post office, a squat building wedged between a bakery and a cobbler's shop, was presided over by Miss Clara Tuttle, a woman of advanced years whose sharp eyes belied her frail appearance. Her hair, white as the gulls that wheeled over the village, was pinned in a severe bun, and her fingers moved with the precision of a telegraph operator as she sorted letters. Poirot entered, his hat in hand, and offered a courteous bow. Mademoiselle Tuttle, I am Hercule Poirot, assisting Inspector Japp in a most delicate matter. I understand Monsieur Alfred Morse was known to you through his use of your services. Miss Tuttle peered at him over her spectacles, her expression a blend of curiosity and suspicion. Morse, yes, came in regular as clockwork, sending telegrams to London, always to a Mr. Black, care of a postbox in Westminster. Paid in cash, never said much. Odd man, kept to himself. Poirot's interest quickened. And the content of these telegrams, mademoiselle? Did you perhaps observe their nature? Miss Tuttle's lips pursed. I don't read folks' messages, Mr. Poirot, but I couldn't help noticing they were short, full of numbers and letters. Codes, I reckoned, though I'm no expert. He sent one the day before he died, last thing in the evening, in a right hurry. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A code, you say? And this final telegram, did it contain, perhaps, the sequence Z13QX7? Miss Tuttle shook her head. Couldn't tell you. I just type what's handed to me. But he was agitated, muttering about catching it at last. Didn't like the look in his eyes, truth be told. Poirot thanked her, his mind cataloguing this new thread. Morse's telegrams suggested a connection beyond St. Albans, perhaps to naval intelligence or something more clandestine. Mr. Black was no ordinary correspondent, and the urgency of Morse's final message hinted at a discovery that had cost him his life. By mid-morning, Poirot and Japp were back at the naval radio station, the wind still sharp, but the rain reduced to a fine mist. The station's stark interior felt colder in daylight, its stone walls absorbing the damp. Poirot returned to the radio cabin, where the scene of Morse's death remained undisturbed. The notepad with Z13QX7 lay on the desk, its ink stark against the paper's yellowed grain. Poirot examined it closely, noting the pressure of the pen, the deliberate strokes. This was no hasty scribble, Inspector, he said, his voice low. Monsieur Morse wrote with purpose, as if to ensure the message endured. Japp, pacing the cramped room, gestured to the radio equipment. The Navy lads say this gear's top-notch, picks up signals from halfway across the channel. But that code, it's not in their books. I had a chap from Portsmouth check it, and he's as baffled as we are. Poirot's fingers traced the dials. their settings unchanged since Morse's death. Then we must look beyond the official codes, mon ami. Morse was chasing what he called a phantom. Perhaps it was a signal not meant for naval ears. Poirot turned to the logbook, its pages filled with Morse's meticulous entries, frequencies, timestamps, and brief descriptions of shipping traffic. The final entry, dated the night of his death, recorded a routine signal from a freighter off Falmouth. But Poirot's attention was drawn to earlier entries, where Morse had noted unidentified transmissions on an obscure frequency, faint but persistent. These notes, spanning weeks, grew more frequent, with annotations like irregular pattern and possible cipher. One entry, dated 3 days before his death, read, "Phantom signal again. Stronger. Must confirm." Poirot's moustache twitched. He was tracking something, Inspector. Something that did not wish to be found. Japp scratched his head. "You think he stumbled on a spy's signal? There's talk of foreign agents sniffing about the coast. What with tensions rising in Europe?" Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "It is possible, but we must not assume. The truth, it lies in the details." He requested to see Leonard Graves again, who, as Morse's colleague, might shed light on these phantom signals. Japp summoned Graves, who arrived looking more haggard than the previous day, his eyes red-rimmed and his hands trembling as he clutched a thermos of tea. "Monsieur Graves," Poirot began, his tone gentle but probing, "you told us Monsieur Morse was obsessed with patterns in the static. Can you describe these discoveries?" Graves swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. "It's hard to explain, sir. Alfred was always at the radio, even off-shift. Said he heard things. Signals that didn't fit. Not Navy. Not commercial. He'd sit there for hours, tuning the dials, scribbling notes. Called it the Phantom because it came and went, like a ghost. I told him he was wasting his time, but he wouldn't listen." Poirot leaned forward. "And did he ever decipher this phantom? Did he speak of Z13QX7? Graves shook his head. "Not that exactly, but the last week he was different, excited, almost feverish. Said he was close to proving something big. Locked his notes in the desk, wouldn't let me see." Poirot's gaze shifted to the desk, where a small drawer bore a simple lock. With Japp's permission, he opened it, revealing a bundle of papers covered in Morse's precise handwriting. Most were technical, frequency charts, signal strengths, but one sheet stood out, a list of letter number combinations, including Z13 and QX7, circled in red ink. "Voilà," Poirot murmured. "The phantom begins to take shape." He handed the sheet to Japp, who frowned. "Looks like a code, all right, but it's gibberish to me. Could be a private system he cooked up." "Or," Poirot said, "a system he intercepted. We must learn to whom these signals were sent, or from whom they came." He questioned Graves further, but the man's answers grew vague, his nervousness bordering on panic. "I didn't touch his work, Mr. Poirot. I swear. I just kept to my shifts. Did my job." Poirot dismissed him, noting the sweat on Graves's brow. "He knows more than he says," he told Japp quietly. "But whether it is guilt or fear, we shall discover." The drizzle had ceased as they stepped outside, the cliffs glistening under a weak sun. Poirot's thoughts turned to the other suspects. Margaret Vale's commercial station, with its inferior equipment, might have intercepted Morse's signals, perhaps out of rivalry or something deeper. Victor Henshaw's linguistic expertise suggested a mind capable of crafting or breaking codes, and his nocturnal walks placed him uncomfortably close to the scene. But the telegrams to Mr. Black pointed to a larger web, one that might stretch beyond Saint. Alden's to the shadowed corridors of espionage. Poirot proposed a visit to the village's only chemist to inquire about substances that could induce a death mistaken for heart failure. Japp agreed, and they drove to a small shop on the high street, its window cluttered with bottles and advertisements for tonics. The chemist, a portly man named Mr. Penrose, greeted them with a wary nod. Morse came in now and then for headache powders. Nothing unusual. Never bought anything strong. Poirot's eyes scanned the shelves, lingering on a locked cabinet labelled prescriptions. And this cabinet, monsieur? It contains, perhaps, substances less benign? Penrose bristled. That's for doctors' orders only. Alkaloids, sedatives, that sort of thing, all accounted for. But when Poirot pressed for the ledger, Penrose admitted a recent purchase of a rare alkaloid used in minute doses for heart conditions had been made in cash by an unfamiliar customer. "Didn't catch the name," he said. "Man in a hurry. Wore a scarf over his face." Poirot's mind seized on this. A poison, subtle and swift, could explain the absence of struggle, the puncture mark later found on Morse's neck. But who had the knowledge and the nerve to administer it? As they left the chemist, Poirot's thoughts returned to the signal. Z13Q. XO7 wasn't random. It was a marker, a signature of something clandestine. Morse had been a hunter, stalking a phantom through the airwaves, and his quarry had turned predator. Back at the inn, Poirot sat by the fire, a fresh tisane in hand, and spread Morse's notes before him. The circled codes, the telegrams, the phantom signals, they formed a pattern, incomplete but tantalizing. "The little grey cells, they work, Inspector," he said to Japp, who was nursing a pint. "This signal, it is not just a code, it is a secret, and secrets, they are dangerous things." Japp grunted. "Dangerous enough to kill for, you mean?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Précisément. And tomorrow we shall see what Madame Vale and Monsieur Henshaw reveal, or conceal." As the fire crackled, Poirot's gaze drifted to the window, where the sea lay under a shroud of mist. The phantom signal was out there, in the ether, and he would find it, no matter how deeply it was hidden. Chapter 4. The Rival's Ambition. The morning sun struggled through a veil of clouds, casting a pale light over St. Alban's, as Hercule Poirot and Inspector Japp set out for Margaret Vale's commercial radio station. The air was sharp with the scent of salt and damp earth, and the cliffs, still slick from the previous night's rain, loomed like silent sentinels. Poirot, bundled in his overcoat, his hat tilted against the breeze, walked with a briskness that belied the weight of the mystery pressing upon his mind. The signal Z13QX7, Alfred Morse's final testament, was a cipher that refused to yield its secrets, yet Poirot felt certain that Margaret Vale, with her sharp tongue and sharper ambitions, held a piece of the puzzle. The commercial station, a mile inland from the naval outpost, was a stark contrast to Morse's fortified domain. Housed in a converted barn, its weathered timbers sagged under the weight of years, and its single antenna, a spindly affair, swayed precariously in the wind. Inside, the air was thick with the hum of outdated equipment, crackling receivers, flickering dials, and a tangle of wires that spoke of frugality rather than precision. Margaret Vale stood at the centre of this chaos, her hands deftly adjusting a telegraph key, her expression one of guarded irritation as she noticed her visitors. "Madame Vale," Poirot began, removing his hat with a flourish. "I am Hercule Poirot, and this is Inspector Japp. We come to discuss the unfortunate matter of Monsieur Morse's death." Margaret's eyes, dark and unyielding, met his without a trace of warmth. "I've already told the inspector what I know, which is precious little. Morse is dead, and I was here, working, when it happened. What more do you want?" Her voice was clipped, each word a challenge, but Poirot noted the slight tremor in her hands as she set down the key. Japp, ever direct, stepped forward. "We're not here to waste your time, Miss Vale. We need to know about your dealings with Morse, your rivalry, your monitoring of his signals, anything that might shed light on why he was killed." Margaret's lips curled into a sardonic smile. "Rivalry? That's a polite way of putting it. Morse had the Navy's purse strings, new equipment, priority channels. My station? We make do with scraps, begging for contracts to keep the lights on. He'd come by, all smug, offering tips on how to improve our range, as if I needed his pity." Poirot's gaze roamed the room, taking in the cluttered desk, the stacks of logbooks, the faint hum of static from the receiver. "And yet, madame, you were not content to let him have his triumph. You listened to his frequencies, did you not?" Margaret's smile faded, her posture stiffening. "It's my job to monitor competitors, Monsieur Poirot. We pick up what we can. Shipping signals, weather reports. Morse's station was loud, impossible to ignore. Doesn't mean I was spying on him." Poirot moved to the desk, his gloved fingers brushing over a logbook left open to the previous week's entries. His eyes caught a familiar sequence. Z13, scrawled in pencil beside a timestamp 2 days before Morse's death. "Voila," he said softly, pointing to the entry. "This code, it is not a shipping signal, nor a weather report. It is the same that Monsieur Morse wrote in his final moments. You intercepted it, madame." "Why?" Margaret's face tightened, but she held his gaze. "I record what I hear. That signal came through, faint but clear. I didn't know what it meant, and I didn't care. It's not my job to decode Navy nonsense." Japp frowned, flipping through the logbook. "You're saying you just happened to catch this? Bit convenient, isn't it?" Margaret's eyes flashed. "Convenient? It's my livelihood, Inspector. If I can prove Morse's station was wasting Navy funds on useless signals, I might get a slice of their budget. That's business, not murder." Poirot noted the defiance in her tone, but also a flicker of unease, as if her words were a shield for something unspoken. "Tell us, madame," Poirot said, his voice gentle but insistent. "Where were you on the night of Monsieur Morse's death? You say you were here, alone. But the station, it is not so far from the cliffs, and the path is discreet." Margaret crossed her arms, her jaw set. "I told you I was here, working late. No one to vouch for me, but that's the truth. I had no reason to kill Morse. His death doesn't change my situation. His station's still got the Navy's backing." Poirot tilted his head, his eyes narrowing. "And yet, madame, ambition, it can drive one to desperate acts. Did Monsieur Morse's success threaten you more than you admit?" Margaret's laugh was sharp, almost brittle. "Threaten me? He was an annoyance, not a threat. I've built this station from nothing, Monsieur Poirot. I don't need to kill to get ahead." But her fingers, now gripping the edge of the desk, betrayed a tension that her words sought to conceal. Poirot made a mental note. Her ambition was afire, burning hot. But was it hot enough to consume a man's life? Japp, growing impatient, pressed further. Did you ever visit Morse's station, Miss Vale? Maybe to have a word, or to snoop around his equipment? Margaret's expression hardened. Once or twice, months ago, when he invited me to see how it's done. Arrogant fool. I didn't go back. His cabin was his kingdom, and he guarded it like a dragon. Poirot's moustache twitched. A kingdom, madame? And did this dragon hoard secrets? Secrets you might have wished to uncover? Margaret's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing, her silence louder than any protest. Poirot turned his attention to the station's equipment, noting its age and limitations. A single receiver, its dials worn from use, sat beside a telegraph key and a stack of spare parts. Your station, it is modest, he said, yet you intercept signals with precision. Tell me, madame, do you have access to chemicals, perhaps for maintenance? Solvents, acids, or something more potent? Margaret's brow furrowed. Chemicals? We use cleaning fluids for the equipment, nothing else. What are you getting at? Poirot smiled faintly. Merely a curiosity, madame. The little grey cells, they explore all possibilities. Japp, sensing the interview's end, made a note to check Margaret's logs against Morse's. As they prepared to leave, Poirot paused at the door, his gaze lingering on a small photograph pinned to the wall. A younger Margaret, smiling beside a man in a naval uniform. A relative, madame? He asked. Margaret's expression softened, then hardened again. My brother, lost at sea 5 years ago. He taught me the trade. Poirot nodded, filing away this glimpse of humanity. Grief, he knew, could fuel ambition, or vengeance. Outside, the air was cooler, the clouds parting to reveal patches of pale sky. Japp lit a cigarette, exhaling with a grunt. She's a tough one, Poirot. All that talk of rivalry, but I reckon she's hiding something. Those logs. Why keep Morse's signal if it meant nothing? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Précisément, Inspector. Madame Vale is a woman of calculation. She intercepts, she records, she plans. But is she a murderer? That we must discover. He proposed a visit to the village chemist to follow up on the alkaloid purchase. But first he wished to examine Morse's cabin again, to search for traces of Margaret's presence. Back at the naval station, the radio cabin was as they had left it, the air heavy with the memory of death. Poirot examined the floor, the desk, the chair, seeking any sign that Margaret had been there. His gloved fingers brushed over a faint smudge on the doorframe, grease, perhaps, from a machine. Curious, he murmured. This station, it is kept clean, yet this mark remains. Could it be from Madame Vale's equipment? Japp shrugged. Could be anything, Poirot. Wind blows all sorts of muck in here. But Poirot's mind was already turning, connecting the grease to the cluttered chaos of Margaret's station. He returned to the logbook, cross-referencing Morse's entries with the Z13 noted in Margaret's log. The timestamps aligned, suggesting her interception was deliberate, not accidental. She was listening, Inspector, Poirot said. But to what end? To steal Morse's success, or to protect her own secrets? Japp rubbed his chin. If she's involved, she's clever about it. No witnesses, no fingerprints. Just that code, tying her to Morse. As they left the station, Poirot's thoughts churned like the sea below. Margaret Vale's ambition was a motive, but not the only one. Leonard Graves's fear and Victor Henshaw's detachment lingered in his mind, each a thread in the tapestry of the crime. The alkaloid, the telegrams to Mr. Black, the phantom signal. They were pieces of a whole, and Poirot was determined to see the pattern complete. "Tomorrow," he said to Japp, "we shall speak with Monsieur Henshaw. His walks, his knowledge of languages, they may hold the key to this cipher." Japp nodded, but his expression was grim. "I hope you're right, Poirot. This case is like chasing shadows." As they drove back to the inn, the cliffs loomed dark against the fading light, and Poirot's grey cells worked tirelessly, weaving the facts into order. Margaret Vale was a woman driven, but by what? Rivalry? Or something deeper? The answer, he knew, lay in the signal, and in the silence it had left behind. Chapter 5. The Linguist's Secrets. The afternoon sky over St. Alden's was a patchwork of grey and fleeting blue, the wind carrying a sharp edge as it swept across the cliffs. Hercule Poirot, his overcoat buttoned tightly against the chill, walked with Inspector Japp along the narrow village street toward the lodgings of Victor Henshaw, the enigmatic linguist whose cool demeanour had piqued Poirot's curiosity. The mystery of Alfred Morse's death, marked by the cryptic signal Z13QX7, was a labyrinth of motives and secrets, and Poirot sensed that Henshaw, with his scholarly air and nocturnal wanderings, held a key to its unravelling. His grey cells, ever active, sifted through the threads of the case. Morse's telegrams to Mr. Black, Margaret Vale's intercepted signals, Leonard Graves's nervous reticence, and the faint puncture mark on Morse's neck hinting at a subtle poison. Henshaw's lodgings were at the edge of the village, in a stone cottage rented from a widowed fisherman. The building was modest, its windows curtained against prying eyes, and a faint scent of tobacco lingered in the air as Poirot and Japp approached. Henshaw opened the door before they could knock, his lean frame filling the doorway, his grey suit as impeccable as it had been at the inn. His eyes, pale and unreadable, met Poirot's with a flicker of amusement. "Monsieur Poirot, Inspector Japp, I expected you sooner. Come in." His voice was smooth, with a trace of an accent Poirot could not place. Eastern European, perhaps, softened by years abroad. The cottage's interior was a study in contrasts. Shelves lined with books in a dozen languages, from Russian to Arabic, stood alongside a sparse desk, bearing only a locked notebook and a fountain pen. A single armchair, worn but comfortable, faced a small fireplace where embers glowed faintly. Henshaw gestured to a pair of mismatched chairs, his movements precise. "You are here about Morse, of course. I have little to add, but ask what you will." Poirot seated himself, his hands folded neatly, his gaze fixed on Henshaw. "Monsieur Henshaw, you are a man of languages, a scholar of patterns. Tell me, what interest did you have in the signals of Monsieur Morse's station?" Henshaw's smile was thin, almost predatory. "Signals are a language, Monsieur Poirot, as I told the inspector. Their rhythms, their repetitions, they speak if one knows how to listen. Morse's transmissions were unusual. They deviated from standard protocols, irregular in timing and structure. I found them fascinating. Nothing more." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Fascinating enough to walk the cliffs at night, near the station. A villager saw a man matching your description, Monsieur, on the evening of Morse's death." Henshaw's fingers paused on his cigarette case, which he had retrieved from his pocket. "The cliffs are public, Monsieur Poirot. I walk to think, to clear my mind. The sea, the wind, they inspire. If I passed the station, it was coincidence." His tone was calm, but Poirot noted the slight tightening of his jaw, the careful precision of his words. Japp, less patient, leaned forward. Coincidence, eh? Bit odd, you poking about near a secure naval post. What were you really after, Henshaw? The linguist lit a cigarette, the flame casting shadows across his angular face. I seek knowledge, Inspector. Morse's signals were a puzzle, like a text in an unknown script. I listened from a distance, using a portable receiver. I never entered his cabin. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And this receiver, monsieur? Where is it now? Henshaw gestured to a corner where a small, battered radio sat on a shelf, its antenna coiled like a snake. A hobbyist's tool, nothing more. I use it to study patterns in the airwaves. Poirot rose, his movements deliberate, and approached the desk. The locked notebook drew his attention, its leather cover worn but intact. And your notes, Monsieur Henshaw? They, too, are part of this hobby? Henshaw hesitated, then unlocked the notebook with a small key from his pocket. See for yourself. They are merely transcriptions. Nothing sinister. Poirot opened the book, his gloved fingers turning the pages with care. The entries were meticulous, phonetic renderings of radio static, annotated with symbols and frequencies. One page, dated the week of Morse's death, listed a sequence, Z13, followed by a series of dashes and dots. Poirot's heart quickened. This, monsieur, it is part of the signal found beside Monsieur Morse. You intercepted it, yes? Henshaw exhaled a plume of smoke, his expression unruffled. I intercepted many signals. That one stood out, unusual, non-standard. I noted it, as I note all anomalies. It meant nothing to me. Poirot closed the notebook, his mind racing. Henshaw's expertise was undeniable, but his detachment was too perfect, a mask that concealed more than it revealed. And yet, monsieur, you did not share this with the authorities. Why? Henshaw shrugged. I am a private man, Monsieur Poirot. My work is academic, not criminal. I had no reason to think Morse's death was anything but natural. Japp snorted. Natural? With a code like that scrawled by his body? Come off it, Henshaw. You're too clever by half. Poirot raised a hand, silencing Japp. Tell me, Monsieur Henshaw, do you know of an Mr. Black in London to whom Morse sent telegrams? Henshaw's eyes flickered, a brief crack in his composure. Number I know of no such person. But the hesitation, however slight, did not escape Poirot's notice. Leaving the cottage, Poirot and Japp walked back toward the village, the cliffs looming to their left. Japp lit another cigarette, his frustration evident. He's slippery, Poirot. Knows more than he's letting on. I'd bet my pension on it. That notebook. Full of, codes, and he acts like it's just a pastime. Poirot nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Monsieur Henshaw is a man of secrets, Inspector. His knowledge of languages, his interest in signals. It is too precise, too convenient. And yet, he does not strike me as careless. If he is our murderer, he is a master of control. They paused at the cliff's edge, where a narrow path wound down to the naval station. Poirot's thoughts turned to the puncture mark on Morse's neck, the alkaloid purchase at the chemist's, and the telegrams to Mr. Black. Henshaw's portable receiver suggested he could intercept signals without entering the station, but his presence near the cliffs placed him dangerously close to the scene. We must verify his movements, Poirot said. The villager who saw him. Let us speak with her. The villager, a fisherman's wife named Mrs. Polly, lived in a cottage overlooking the harbour. Her account was clear. On the night of Morse's death, She had seen a tall man in a grey coat walking the cliff path after dusk, his silhouette stark against the moonlit sea. "He was near the station, sir," she told Poirot, her hands twisting a dishcloth. "Didn't stop, just kept walking, but it was odd, him being out so late." Poirot thanked her, his mind cataloguing the detail. Henshaw's walks were no mere strolls. They were purposeful, perhaps to listen, perhaps to act. Back at the Fisherman's Rest, Poirot sat by the fire, a fresh tisane in hand, and reviewed his notes. Henshaw's notebook was a treasure trove, its codes linking to Morse's signal. But his calm denial suggested a man confident in his alibi, or his ability to evade detection. Margaret Vale's intercepted Z13 pointed to her own surveillance, while Leonard Graves's fear hinted at knowledge he dared not share. The alkaloid, the telegrams, the phantom signal, they were threads in a tapestry, and Poirot was determined to weave them together. "Tomorrow," he said to Japp, who was nursing a pint, "we must revisit the station. The equipment, the logs, they may hold more clues. And we must learn who this Mr. Black is. The telegrams, they are not innocent." Japp nodded, his expression grim. "You're on to something, Poirot. I can feel it. But Henshaw, he's like a ghost himself, slipping through our fingers." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A ghost, mon ami? Non, he is a man, and men leave traces. Hercule Poirot will find them." As the fire crackled, Poirot's gaze drifted to the window, where the cliffs stood dark against the fading light. The signal Z13QX7 was a whisper from the ether, a secret that had cost Morse his life. Henshaw's secrets, like the sea, were deep and treacherous, but Poirot's grey cells were relentless, and the truth, he knew, would not remain hidden for long. Chapter 6. The Autopsy's Clue. The morning in St. Albans dawned with a deceptive calm, the sea lying smooth under a sky streaked with wisps of cloud, as if the storm of days past had exhausted itself. Hercule Poirot, his attire as impeccable as ever, stood at the window of his room at the Fisherman's Rest, sipping a tisane and gazing at the cliffs that guarded the secrets of Alfred Morse's death. The cryptic signal ZU13QX7, scrawled in the radio operator's final moments, was a cipher that haunted Poirot's thoughts, its meaning tantalizingly close yet veiled. The suspects, Leonard Graves, Margaret Vale, and Victor Henshaw, each bore the weight of suspicion, their motives and movements forming a complex web. But it was the method of Morse's death, so silent and precise, that now drew Poirot's focus. A clue, he sensed, lay in the physical evidence, and he had resolved to press the local doctor for a closer examination of the body. Inspector Japp joined Poirot at the inn's breakfast table, his face etched with the weariness of a man wrestling with an elusive case. "Morning, Poirot," he said, buttering a slice of toast with more force than necessary. "I've got Dr. Hargrove coming to the station at 10. He's the one who examined Morse, called it heart failure. But you're not satisfied, are you?" Poirot's moustache twitched, his eyes gleaming with quiet intensity. "Non, mon ami. A heart doesn't fail without cause, and a man doesn't write a code like Z13QX7 in his final breath unless driven by necessity. We must look deeper." The naval radio station, perched on its wind-swept cliff, seemed to brood under the morning light, its stone walls unyielding as Poirot and Japp arrived. Dr. Hargrove, a stoop-shouldered man in his 50s with a perpetually furrowed brow, awaited them in the station's small office, his medical bag at his side. His manner was brisk, tinged with defensiveness, as if he anticipated criticism. "I've done my job, Inspector," he said, adjusting his spectacles. "Morse was dead when I saw him, slumped over the desk. No marks, no signs of a struggle. Heart failure's the obvious conclusion. He was under strain, working those long night shifts." Poirot, standing with his hands clasped behind his back, tilted his head. "Monsieur le Docteur, the obvious, it is often a mask for the truth. You observed no marks at all? Nothing unusual?" Hargrove hesitated, his fingers drumming on his bag. "Well, I didn't think much of it at the time, but there was a small mark on his neck, a puncture, like from a needle. Tiny, barely noticeable. I assumed it was a scratch, perhaps from his collar." Poirot's eyes sharpened, his voice soft but insistent. "A puncture, you say? And you did not investigate further?" Hargrove bristled. "There was no blood, no swelling. I tested for common poisons, arsenic, cyanide. Nothing showed up. I'm no specialist in rare toxins, Monsieur Poirot." Japp, sensing a breakthrough, leaned forward. "A needle mark, eh? That changes things. Could it be poison? Something subtle?" Hargrove shrugged, his discomfort evident. "Possibly, but we'd need a proper toxicologist for that. The nearest lab's in Plymouth, and they'd need to know what to look for." Poirot's mind raced, recalling the chemist's ledger and the mysterious purchase of a rare alkaloid, potentially lethal in high doses. "Merci, Docteur," he said. "This mark, it is a clue most vital. We shall arrange for further tests. But tell me, was there anything else? His expression, his posture, any detail that struck you?" Hargrove frowned, rubbing his chin. He looked surprised, I suppose. Eyes wide, mouth slightly open, like he'd seen something unexpected. But he was clutching that notepad, the one with the code. Didn't let go, even in death. Poirot nodded, filing away this image of Morse's final moment. A man caught off guard, yet determined to leave a message. "Bon, we shall need a sample sent to Plymouth, Inspector. This alkaloid, it may be our key." Leaving Hargrove to his notes, Poirot and Japp returned to the radio cabin, where the air still held the faint metallic tang of machinery. Poirot examined the desk again, his gloved fingers tracing the edges of the notepad. The signal ZEED 13QX7 was written with such precision, each character deliberate, as if Morse had fought to record it, despite his fading strength. "He saw his killer, perhaps," Poirot murmured. "Or he heard something, a signal that betrayed a secret." Japp, peering over his shoulder, grunted. "You think he was poisoned right here, in this locked room? How'd the killer get in and out?" Poirot's gaze swept the cabin, noting the simple bolt on the door, the single window sealed tight against the sea air. "The lock, it is no great barrier, mon ami. A skilled hand could open it, or perhaps Morse himself admitted his visitor, trusting them until it was too late." He moved to the radio, its dials still set to the frequency logged on the night of the death. A faint hum emanated from the receiver, a whisper of static that seemed to echo Morse's phantom. This machine, it was his confidant. It spoke to him, and he answered, until it betrayed him. Japp, impatient for action, suggested revisiting the chemist to confirm the alkaloid's purchase. The shop was quiet when they arrived, Mr. Penrose polishing bottles behind the counter. Poirot's questions were precise. "This alkaloid, Monsieur Penrose, the one purchased in cash by an unknown man. Can you describe him further?" Penrose shook his head, his expression uneasy. "I told you, he kept his scarf high, hat low. Tallish, I think, but it was dark, and he was in and out quick, paid in cash, took the vial, and left. Poirot pressed gently. And this vial, it contained enough to kill? Penrose nodded reluctantly. In the wrong hands, yes. It's meant for heart patients, tiny doses. Too much, and it stops the heart clean. No trace, unless you know to look. Poirot's grey. Cells churned. A poison so subtle, administered by needle, would leave no obvious signs, only a mark easily overlooked. The killer, then, was someone with access to the station, knowledge of toxins, and the nerve to act swiftly. Victor Henshaw's linguistic expertise and cliffside walks made him a candidate, but Margaret Vale's proximity and Leonard Graves's access could not be dismissed, and the telegrams to Mr. Black, were they Morse's attempt to report his discovery or part of a deeper conspiracy? Back at the inn, Poirot spread his notes before the fire, the crackle of logs a counterpoint to his thoughts. Jap, nursing a pint, watched him with a mix of admiration and exasperation. You're like a bloodhound, Poirot, sniffing out clues where I see none. This poison business, it points to someone clever, doesn't it? Poirot nodded, his eyes fixed on the notepad's code. Clever, yes, and bold. The killer knew Morse's habits, his solitude. They struck in silence, leaving only this signal as a witness. Poirot proposed a call to his contact at the Home Office to inquire about Mr. Black and the possibility of espionage. Jap arranged the call, and Poirot spoke briefly with a Mr. Carter, a discreet official with knowledge of naval intelligence. Carter confirmed that Mr. Black was an alias for a retired officer who monitored reports of foreign activity. Morse's telegrams, Carter revealed, had warned of unusual signals, possibly from a foreign agent operating near St. Albans. He was on to something, Carter said, his voice taut. We were waiting for his final report when he died. Poirot thanked him, his mind alight with new possibilities. Espionage, then, Jap said, as Poirot relayed the conversation. That puts Henshaw in the frame, with his fancy codes and late-night strolls. Poirot raised a hand. Perhaps, mon ami. But we must not rush. Madame Vale's ambition, Monsieur Graves's fear, they too may conceal a motive. And this alkaloid, it is not a common tool. We must learn who had access and who had the knowledge to use it. As evening fell, Poirot sat by the window, the sea a dark expanse beyond the glass. The puncture mark was a revelation, transforming the case from a mystery of motive to one of method. The killer had been in the cabin, face to face with Morse, yet left no trace save a signal and a needle's prick. Poirot's thoughts turned to the suspects, their secrets intertwining like the currents below. Tomorrow, he said to Jap, we shall test their stories further. The truth, it is close, Inspector. It waits only for Hercule Poirot to call its name. Chapter 7. The Shadow of Espionage. The air in St. Albans carried a chill that seemed to seep into the bones, a damp weight that clung to the morning as Hercule Poirot and Inspector Jap made their way to the village telegraph office. The sea, visible beyond the cliffs, was a restless grey, its waves whispering secrets that Poirot was determined to unravel. The death of Alfred Morse, marked by the cryptic signal Z13 QCX7 and a faint puncture mark on his neck, had taken on a darker hue with the revelation of his telegrams to Mr. Black, a naval intelligence alias. The possibility of espionage suggested by Poirot's Home Office contact cast a long shadow over the case, and Poirot's grey cells were alight with the challenge of tracing the threads that connected Morse's discovery to his demise. The telegraph office, presided over by Miss Clara Tuttle, was a hive of quiet efficiency, its walls lined with pigeonholes stuffed with envelopes and forms. Miss Tuttle, her white hair as severe as ever, greeted Poirot with a nod, her sharp eyes assessing him as he entered. "Back again, Monsieur Poirot. I suppose it's about Morse's telegrams." Poirot inclined his head, his hat in hand. "Précisément, mademoiselle. You mentioned Monsieur Morse's messages to Mr. Black in London. I would know more of their frequency, their timing. Any detail that struck you as unusual?" Miss Tuttle adjusted her spectacles, retrieving a ledger from beneath the counter. "He sent them weekly, sometimes twice a week, always in the evening. Short messages, full of numbers and letters, like codes. The last one, the day before he died, was different. Longer, and he was in a state, pacing like a caged animal. Said something about proving it at last." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And this message, did you keep a copy?" Miss Tuttle shook her head. "Against regulations, sir. I sent it as written, but I remember it had that code you asked about, Z13QX7, right at the end." Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of his mind's quickening. "Merci, mademoiselle. This is most illuminating." The confirmation that Morse's final telegram included the signal was a vital link, suggesting he had intended to report his discovery to naval intelligence. But why, Poirot wondered, had he not used the station's secure channels? The answer, he suspected, lay in Morse's fear, or his distrust of those around him. Japp, standing by the door, shifted impatiently. "Sounds like Morse was onto something big, Poirot. Espionage, like your Home Office chap said. Could be a foreign agent, right here in St. Alden's Poirot." Nodded, his expression grave. "Indeed, Inspector. The signal, it is no mere anomaly. It is a message, perhaps a marker, for one who moves in the shadows. We must return to the station and examine Morse's logs once more." The naval radio station stood stark against the cliffs, its antennas glinting faintly in the weak sunlight. Inside the radio cabin, Poirot pored over Morse's logbooks, his gloved fingers tracing the entries with meticulous care. The records of unidentified transmissions had grown more frequent in the weeks before his death, each noting a faint signal on an obscure frequency, often late at night. One entry, dated 2 days prior, read, "Phantom signal clear. Z13. QX7 confirmed. Must warn Black." Poirot's heart quickened. "Voila, Inspector. Morse knew he had found something dangerous. This phantom was his quarry, and it led to his end." Japp, peering over his shoulder, frowned. "Warn Black, eh? So he was working for intelligence, reporting on these odd signals. But who was sending them? And why kill him for it?" Poirot's gaze swept the cabin, lingering on the radio's dials, still set to the frequency of Morse's final night. "The sender, mon ami, is our killer, or their ally. The signal was a secret, and Morse's discovery threatened to expose it. We must consider our suspects: Monsieur Graves, who knew Morse's habits, Madame Vale, who intercepted his signals, and Monsieur Henshaw, whose expertise in codes is too convenient." To test his theory, Poirot proposed a call to the Home Office using the station's secure line. Mr. Carter, the intelligence officer, was terse but forthcoming. "Morse was one of ours, unofficially," he admitted. "He'd been tracking irregular signals for months, thought they might be foreign. German, possibly, or worse. His last telegram suggested he'd cracked their pattern, but he died before we could act." Poirot pressed further. And this Mr. Black, he is you? Carter's voice tightened. An alias, yes, for security. Morse was to report directly to me if he found anything concrete. Poirot thanked him, his mind racing. Morse had been a sentinel, guarding Britain's airwaves, and his vigilance had drawn a deadly response. Back at the Fisherman's Rest, Poirot sat by the fire, his notes spread before him like a map of the case. Jap, nursing a pint, watched him with a mix of awe and impatience. You're building a case, Poirot, but it's all air so far. Espionage, poison, codes. Where's the proof? Poirot's eyes gleamed. The proof, Inspector, is in the patterns. Morse's signal was a warning, sent to Mr. Black to expose a spy. The killer, they knew this and acted swiftly, with a poison so subtle it nearly escaped notice. He tapped the notepad, where Z13QX7 stared back like a challenge. This code, it is the voice of the phantom. We must learn its language. Poirot's thoughts turned to Victor Henshaw, whose notebook had contained fragments of the same code, and whose cliffside walks placed him near the station at the critical hour. His linguistic expertise suggested a mind capable of crafting or deciphering such a signal, but his calm denial was a wall Poirot had yet to breach. Margaret Vale's intercepted Z13 pointed to her own surveillance, perhaps driven by ambition. But could she have accessed the alkaloid? Leonard Graves, nervous and reticent, had the easiest access to the cabin, yet his fear seemed born of ignorance rather than guilt. To narrow the field, Poirot suggested a visit to the village chemist once, more to press Mr. Penrose on the alkaloid purchase. The shop was busier now, with locals collecting remedies, but Penrose drew them aside, his expression wary. "I've told you all I know," he said. "The man bought the alkaloid, paid in cash, kept his face hidden. I didn't ask questions." Poirot's voice was gentle, but insistent. "And yet, monsieur, you are a man of observation. Was there nothing, his voice, his manner, that might identify him?" Penrose hesitated, then admitted. He spoke softly, with a bit of an accent. "Not local, maybe foreign. Hard to say. He was in a hurry, kept looking out the window." This detail, slight as it was, sent a spark through Poirot's mind. Henshaw's faint accent, possibly Eastern European, aligned with the description, though it was far from conclusive. "Merci, monsieur," Poirot said, his thoughts already turning to the cliffs where Henshaw's walks had been noted. "We must verify his movements, Inspector," he said, as they left the shop. The villager, Mrs. Polly, she may have seen more than she realized. Mrs. Polly, found at her cottage, was knitting by the fire when they arrived. Her memory was sharp, her words measured. "That man in the grey coat, I saw him twice that week, always late, once near the station, once further along, near the old smuggler's path. He carried a case, small, like a doctor's bag." Poirot's eyes narrowed. A portable receiver, perhaps, or something more sinister, like a syringe? "You have been most helpful, madame," he said, his mind cataloguing the image. As evening fell, Poirot and Jap returned to the inn, the sea a dark expanse beyond the windows. Poirot sat by the fire, his tisane cooling as he reviewed his notes. The shadow of espionage loomed large, with Morse's telegrams and the phantom signal pointing to a foreign hand. Henshaw remained the most likely suspect, his expertise and proximity damning, yet Poirot hesitated to close the net. "The killer, mon ami, is a chess player, moving with precision," he said to Jap. "We must anticipate their next move. Tomorrow we shall test their nerve." Jap raised an eyebrow. Test how? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. By letting them believe the phantom is not yet silent. We shall see who reacts, and how. The fire crackled, casting shadows that danced like the secrets Poirot was determined to uncover. Chapter 8. The Confrontation. The evening in St. Albans was cloaked in a heavy mist, the cliffs and sea swallowed by a veil that muffled sound and blurred the outlines of the village. Hercule Poirot, seated in the dimly lit common room of the Fisherman's Rest, felt the weight of the mystery pressing upon him like the fog outside. The cryptic signal Z13, Cook 7, Alfred Morse's final act, had woven a web of suspicion around Leonard Graves, Margaret Vale, and Victor Henshaw, each entangled by their proximity to the naval radio station and their own guarded secrets. The puncture mark on Morse's neck, the rare alkaloid purchased in secret, and the telegrams to Mr. Black pointed to a crime of calculated precision, steeped in the shadow of espionage. Tonight, Poirot had resolved to tighten the net, to draw out the truth by confronting the suspects together, a method he favored for its power to unsettle the guilty. Inspector Japp, his face etched with the strain of the case, had arranged for the three to gather in the station's common room, a Spartan space with a long table, a few chairs, and a single window overlooking the invisible sea. The air was thick with the scent of damp wool and machine oil, the station's isolation amplifying the tension as Poirot entered, his small frame radiating authority. Graves, Vale, and Henshaw were already seated, their postures a study in contrast. Graves hunched, his ink-stained fingers twisting a handkerchief. Vale rigid, her dark eyes defiant. Henshaw leaning back, his cigarette case gleaming in his hand, his expression one of studied calm. "Monsieur, Madame," Poirot began, his voice clear and deliberate, "we are here because Monsieur Alfred Morse was murdered, his life taken not by chance, but by a hand that sought to silence him. The signal Z13 QX7, written in his final moments, is no mere code, it is the key to his death." He paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back, his gaze sweeping over the trio. Graves flinched, his handkerchief nearly tearing. Vale's jaw tightened, her hands clasped in her lap. Henshaw's eyes narrowed, but he remained still, a statue of composure. Japp, standing by the door, folded his arms. "We've got evidence, and it's damning. A puncture mark on Morse's neck, a rare alkaloid bought in cash at the chemist's. Someone in this room knows more than they're saying." Poirot nodded, picking up the thread. "The facts, they are clear. Monsieur Morse was tracking a phantom signal, one he believed to be of grave importance. He sent telegrams to Mr. Black, an alias for naval intelligence, reporting his findings. This signal, Z13 QX7, was his final discovery, a marker, perhaps, for a spy's transmissions. The killer, they knew this, and acted to protect their secret." He turned to Graves, whose face was pale as the mist outside. "Monsieur Graves, you worked with Morse, knew his habits, his obsession with this phantom. You were in the station daily, with access to his cabin. Yet you say you knew nothing of his discoveries?" Graves' voice was a stammer. I told you, sir. He was secretive, kept his notes locked away, wouldn't talk. I thought he was mad, chasing static. I didn't touch him, I swear." His eyes darted to the others, as if seeking an ally, but found only silence. Poirot's gaze shifted to Margaret Vale, whose defiance seemed to waver under his scrutiny. "Madame Vale, your station intercepted this signal, Z13, days before Morse's death. You claim it, was professional rivalry. Yet your ambition is fierce. Did you see Morse as a threat, one to be eliminated?" Vale's laugh was sharp, almost brittle. "Eliminate him? For what? His death changes nothing. His station still has the Navy's money. I was at my post, working, when he died. You've no proof otherwise." But her fingers, gripping the table's edge, betrayed a tremor Poirot did not miss. Finally, he faced Victor Henshaw, whose cigarette glowed faintly in the dim light. "Monsieur Henshaw, you are a man of codes, of languages. Your notebook contains fragments of this signal, and your walks placed you near the station at the hour of death. You claim academic curiosity, yet your knowledge is too precise, your presence too convenient." Henshaw's smile was thin, his voice smooth as glass. "You weave a fine story, Monsieur Poirot, but it lacks substance. I study signals, yes, but I am no spy. I was not in the cabin, and I have no knowledge of poisons." His calm was a challenge, but Poirot noted the slight tightening of his fingers around the cigarette case. Poirot paused, letting the silence stretch, heavy with suspicion. "The killer," he continued, "used a poison so subtle it nearly escaped notice. An alkaloid administered by needle, leaving only a mark on Morse's neck. The cabin was locked, yet the bolt is simple, easily opened by one who knew its weakness. The motive? To silence Morse before he could reveal the phantom signal's source, a source that threatened secrets of great consequence." He produced the notepad, its inked code stark in the lamplight. This signal. It was a warning, a cry from a man who knew he was in danger. But from whom? Graves's handkerchief tore at last, a soft rip in the quiet room. Vale's eyes flicked to the door, as if gauging escape. Henshaw exhaled smoke, his gaze steady, but guarded. Poirot's voice softened, almost hypnotic. "Each of you had opportunity. Monsieur Graves, you could enter the cabin unnoticed. Madame Vale, your station is near, your path discreet. Monsieur Henshaw, your walks brought you to the cliffs, where shadows hide many sins. But motive, this is what we seek. Was it fear, ambition, or betrayal?" Japp, sensing the moment, stepped forward. "We're close, Poirot. That alkaloid wasn't bought by chance. It took planning, knowledge. One of you knows more than you're letting on." Poirot nodded, his eyes never leaving the suspects. "Oui, Inspector. And we shall find the truth, for it cannot hide from Hercule Poirot. The signal, it speaks, and I listen." He turned to the table, where a radio receiver had been brought from the cabin, its dials gleaming faintly. This machine, it was Morse's confidant. It carried the phantom signal, and it carries the truth still. Tomorrow, we shall test its voice. He did not elaborate, but the promise hung in the air, a challenge to the guilty. Graves stammered a protest. Vale's lips pressed into a thin line, and Henshaw's smile faded, replaced by a flicker of unease. As the suspects were dismissed, Poirot lingered in the common room, his thoughts a whirl of connections. The alkaloid purchase, described by the chemist as made by a man with a scarf and a foreign accent, pointed to Henshaw, yet the evidence was circumstantial. Vale's intercepted signal suggested knowledge she denied, while Graves's fear hinted at complicity, if not in murder, then in silence. The telegrams to Mr. Black confirmed Morse's role as a sentinel against espionage, but the killer's identity remained a shadow. Japp, locking the station behind them, turned to Poirot. "You rattled them all right. But did you see anything? Anything solid?" Poirot's eyes gleamed in the mist. "I saw, mon ami, the cracks in their masks. The guilty one, they will move soon, for they fear the signal is not yet silent. We must watch, and we must listen. He proposed a plan to spread word that a new signal linked to Z13QX7 had been intercepted, a ruse to provoke the killer into action. Japp agreed, his expression grim. Risky, Poirot, but I trust you. Let's hope they take the bait. As they walked back to the inn, the fog thickened, wrapping St. Alban's in a shroud. Poirot's mind was a beacon, cutting through the haze. The confrontation had set the stage, and the killer, he knew, would not remain still. The phantom signal was a whisper of betrayal, and Poirot was determined to give it a voice. Chapter 9. The Trap. The mist that had cloaked St. Alban's the previous evening lingered into the morning, a spectral veil that softened the edges of the cliffs and muffled the sea's ceaseless murmur. Hercule Poirot, standing at the window of the Fisherman's Rest, his tisane steaming in the cool air, felt the weight of the mystery pressing ever closer. The signal Z13QX7, Alfred Morse's final testament, was a cipher that had drawn a web of suspicion around Leonard Graves, Margaret Vale, and Victor Henshaw. The puncture mark on Morse's neck, the rare alkaloid, and the telegrams to Mr. Black pointed to a calculated murder steeped in the shadow of espionage. Poirot's confrontations with the suspects had stirred the waters, and now he planned to cast a net, a subtle trap to provoke the guilty into revealing themselves. Inspector Japp joined him in the inn's common room, his face set with determination, despite the early hour. "Morning, Poirot," he said, adjusting his bowler hat. "That was quite the performance last night. You've got them rattled, no doubt. What's the next move?" Poirot's eyes gleamed, his moustache twitching with anticipation. "Mon ami, we shall set a trap, delicate yet irresistible. We will let it be known that a new signal, QX7Z13, has been intercepted by the naval station, a signal that threatens to expose the phantom's source. The killer, they will fear discovery and act to silence this new threat." Japp raised an eyebrow, skeptical, but intrigued. "A fake signal? Risky, but clever. How do we spread the word without tipping our hand?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Through the village, Inspector. Gossip. It travels faster than the telegraph. We shall confide in Miss Tuttle at the post office, a woman whose discretion is matched only by her knack for sharing news. She will ensure the suspects hear of it, and we shall watch their reactions." At the telegraph office, Miss Clara Tuttle received them with her usual sharp-eyed scrutiny, her fingers pausing over a stack of envelopes. Poirot, with the air of a conspirator sharing a grave secret, leaned close. "Mademoiselle, we rely on your discretion, but also your influence. A new signal, QX7Z13, has been intercepted, linked to Monsieur Morse's discovery. It suggests his killer is still active. You understand the need for selective sharing?" Miss Tuttle's eyes widened, her lips pursing with the thrill of importance. "I'll keep it quiet, Monsieur Poirot, but I'll make sure the right ears hear. The village talks, you know." Poirot nodded, satisfied. "Merci. Your aid is invaluable." By midday, the rumour had taken root. Poirot and Japp, stationed discreetly near the village square, observed the suspect's movements. Leonard Graves emerged from the inn, his face pale, his eyes darting as he hurried towards the naval station. Margaret Vale was seen at her commercial station, her posture tense as she spoke with a delivery boy, who later confirmed she'd asked about naval activity. Victor Henshaw, however, remained elusive, his cottage curtains drawn, though a villager reported seeing him on the cliffs at dawn, carrying his portable receiver. Poirot proposed a return to the naval station to prepare the trap's second phase. The radio cabin, still untouched since Morse's death, was a silent witness to the crime. Poirot examined the equipment once more, ensuring the dials were set to a frequency that mimicked Morse's phantom signal. "We shall broadcast a faint signal tonight," he told Japp, "a repetition of QX 7Z13, just strong enough to be intercepted. The killer, if they are listening, will fear exposure and come to the station to stop it." Japp nodded, his expression grim. "And we'll be waiting. I've got 2 constables ready to hide in the shadows. If someone shows, we'll nab them." As evening fell, the mist thickened, wrapping the cliffs in a shroud that suited Poirot's plan. He and Japp took up positions in a small storage room adjacent to the radio cabin, its door ajar to afford a view of the main entrance. The constables, stationed outside along the cliff path, were instructed to watch for any approach. The station was dark, save for the faint glow of the radio's dials, tuned to broadcast the false signal. Poirot's heart beat steadily, his senses attuned to the slightest sound, the creak of a floorboard, the rustle of the wind, the distant crash of waves. Hours passed, the silence broken only by Japp's occasional mutterings about the cold. Then, just past midnight, a shadow moved outside the window. A tall figure cloaked in the mist. Poirot's hand tightened on Japp's arm, signaling silence. The figure paused, then approached the cabin door, testing the bolt with a practiced hand. The lock clicked softly, and the door eased open, revealing Victor Henshaw, his grey coat damp with mist, a small case in his hand. He moved to the radio, his movements swift and precise, adjusting the dials as if to disrupt the signal. Japp sprang forward, his voice sharp. "Henshaw, stay where you are!" The linguist froze, his face a mask of surprise that quickly hardened into resignation. The constables burst in, securing his arms as Poirot stepped into the light, his eyes gleaming. "Monsieur Henshaw, you have come to silence the phantom, n'est-ce pas? But the signal, it was a lure, and you have walked into our trap." Henshaw's lips curled into a faint smile, his composure returning. "A clever ruse, Monsieur Poirot, but you have no proof, only suspicion." Poirot gestured to the case, which Japp opened to reveal a portable receiver and a small syringe, its needle glinting. "Au contraire, monsieur. This syringe, it matches the mark on Morse's neck. And your notebook, it holds the codes that betray you. Shall we see what else your cottage conceals?" A search of Henshaw's lodgings, conducted under Japp's authority, uncovered a hidden compartment in his desk. Inside was a vial of the rare alkaloid, its label matching the chemist's description, and a cipher book with entries matching Z13, QX7. Poirot's voice was soft but unyielding. "You intercepted Morse's signals, monsieur, and when he grew too close to your secret, you silenced him with a poison most subtle. The signal, it was your marker, sent to your handlers abroad." Henshaw remained silent, his eyes cold, but the evidence was damning. Japp, securing the items, turned to Poirot. "You've done it, Poirot. Nailed him with your trap." Poirot's expression was somber. "The trap, mon ami, was but the final step. The truth, it was in the signal all along." As Henshaw was led away, the mist seemed to lift, the cliffs stark against the dawning sky. The phantom signal had found its voice, and Poirot's grey cells had prevailed. Chapter 10. The Confession. The dawn over St. Alden's broke with a fragile clarity, the mist of the previous night giving way to a pale sun, that cast long shadows across the cliffs. Hercule Poirot, seated in the austere office of the naval radio station, felt the weight of the mystery lifting, though the air still carried the chill of unresolved truths. Victor Henshaw, apprehended in the act of tampering with the station's radio, sat across from him, his wrists bound by Japp's constables. The linguist's cool facade had cracked, his eyes no longer holding the detached amusement of their earlier encounters. The syringe, the vial of alkaloid, and the cipher book found in his cottage were laid out on the table, silent witnesses to a crime meticulously planned. The signal Z13, QX7, Alfred Morse's final message, had led Poirot to this moment, and now he sought the final piece, the confession that would lay bare the motive behind the murder. Inspector Japp, pacing the room with the energy of a man tasting victory, gestured to the evidence. "You're caught, Henshaw, fair and square. That syringe, the poison, it's enough to put you away. Why not make it easier and tell us the truth?" Henshaw's lips twitched, a ghost of his former smile. But his gaze was fixed on Poirot, as if recognizing the true architect of his downfall. "You are persistent, Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice low, the faint accent more pronounced in his fatigue. "Very well, I will speak, but not to ease your burden, only to set the record straight." Poirot leaned forward, his hands folded neatly, his eyes sharp as cut glass. "Parlez, monsieur. Tell us of the phantom signal, of Monsieur Morse, and why you took his life." Henshaw exhaled a long, measured breath and began. "I'm a linguist, as I said, but my work was never merely academic. I was engaged, by parties abroad, to monitor naval communications along this coast. The signals, they were a way to track British movements, to anticipate their plans. It was delicate work, requiring precision and secrecy." He paused, his fingers flexing, as if longing for his cigarette case. "Morse, he was a problem. His station, with its advanced equipment, picked up my transmissions, faint coded signals meant for my handlers. I used Z13QX7 as a marker, a confirmation that my messages were sent. Morse, he was clever, too clever. He began to track the pattern, to suspect it was no ordinary static. He intercepted my signal by chance, but he pursued it with obsession, noting it in his logs, sending telegrams to this Mr. Black. I knew he was close to exposing me." Poirot's moustache twitched, his mind aligning the confession with the evidence. "And so, monsieur, you acted. The alkaloid, the syringe, how did you come by them?" Henshaw's eyes darkened. The alkaloid was supplied by my contacts, a precaution for emergencies. It was subtle, untraceable, unless you knew to look. I bought it through the chemist, using cash, keeping my face hidden. Morse trusted me, you see. I'd spoken to him once or twice, feigning interest in his work. That night, I knocked on the cabin door, said I had a question about signals. He let me in, never suspecting. A quick prick to the neck, and it was done. He collapsed, clutching his notepad, writing that cursed code as he died. Japp, his face red with indignation, slammed a fist on the table. "You cold-blooded devil! Killed him to save your own skin. And for what? To spy for some foreign power?" Henshaw's smile was bitter. "For survival, Inspector. In this world, one does what one must. Morse was a casualty. Nothing more." Poirot's voice was soft, but unyielding. "And the signal, monsieur? Why write it at all if it was your secret?" Henshaw shrugged. A mistake, perhaps, or defiance. He knew he was dying, knew I was the cause. He wanted to leave a mark, a clue to betray me. Poirot nodded, his grey cells piecing together the final threads. The telegrams to Mr. Black had been Morse's attempt to warn naval intelligence of the spy in their midst. The puncture mark, the alkaloid, the locked cabin, all pointed to a killer who moved with surgical precision, exploiting Morse's trust. Henshaw's confession confirmed the espionage, the signal's role as a marker for foreign communications, and the desperate act to silence a man who had come too close to the truth. Japp, securing the evidence, turned to Poirot. "We've got him, Poirot. Confession, syringe, the lot. He'll face justice. No mistake." Poirot's expression was sombre, his eyes fixed on Henshaw. "Justice, oui, but it is a heavy thing, mon ami. Monsieur Henshaw, you played a dangerous game, and the price was a man's life." Henshaw met his gaze, unflinching. "I regret nothing, Monsieur Poirot, only that I underestimated you." As the constables led Henshaw away, Poirot lingered in the office, his thoughts turning to the broader implications. The Home Office would need to be informed, the Navy alerted to secure their frequencies. The phantom signal, a whisper of betrayal, had been silenced, but its echoes lingered in the air. Poirot's mind, ever methodical, reviewed the case. Graves's fear, Vale's ambition, the chemist's ledger, the villager's sighting. Each had played a part, leading him to the trap that had ensnared Henshaw. Outside, the sun climbed higher, burning away the last of the mist. Japp clapped Poirot on the shoulder, a rare grin breaking through his usual gruffness. "You've done it again, Poirot. Sniffed out a spy like a bloodhound. How do you manage it?" Poirot's smile was faint, almost melancholic. "The little grey cells, Inspector. They see the order beneath the chaos. But the victory, it is bittersweet, for a life was lost to bring us here." As they prepared to return to the inn, Poirot's gaze drifted to the cliffs, where the sea churned with restless energy. The confession had closed the case, but questions remained. About the reach of Henshaw's handlers, about the vulnerabilities of St. Alden's. For now, though, the phantom signal was silent, and Poirot's work was done. Chapter 11. The Loose Ends. The midday sun hung low over St. Alden's. Its light filtered through a haze that lent the cliffs an ethereal glow, as if the village itself exhaled a sigh of relief. Hercule Poirot, seated in the Fisherman's Rest with a steaming tisane, felt the quiet satisfaction of a puzzle nearly solved. Victor Henshaw's confession had unravelled the mystery of Alfred Morse's death, revealing the linguist as a spy who had silenced the radio operator to protect his clandestine transmissions. The signal ZEED13QX7, scrawled in Morse's final moments, had been the key, a marker for Henshaw's espionage that had led Poirot to set his trap. Yet, as was his custom, Poirot's grey cells lingered on the loose ends, the delicate threads that required tying to ensure the tapestry of truth was complete. Inspector Japp, nursing a pint across the table, was in high spirits, his usual gruffness softened by the triumph of the arrest. "We've got him, Poirot. Henshaw, locked up tight, with enough evidence to keep him there for years. Spy or no spy, he's done for." Poirot's moustache twitched, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of amusement and caution. "Oui, mon ami. The confession is a victory, but the case, it is not yet closed. There are questions, small but significant, that we must address. The truth, it demands precision." Japp raised an eyebrow, setting down his glass. "Questions?" The man admitted it. Poison, syringe, the lot. What's left to tie up? Poirot leaned forward, his voice low and measured. "The others, Inspector. Graves, and Madame Vale. Their roles, though not murderous, are not without shadow. And the Navy, they must know the full extent of the breach. Let us ensure no detail escapes us." Poirot proposed a final meeting with Leonard Graves and Margaret Vale to clarify their actions and dispel any lingering doubts. Japp, though sceptical, arranged for the two to join them at the inn's common room, where the fire crackled with a warmth that belied the chill of the case. Graves arrived first, his wiry frame hunched, his ink-stained fingers clutching a worn cap. His eyes, red-rimmed from lack of sleep, darted nervously as he sat. Margaret Vale followed, her posture rigid, her dark eyes wary but defiant, as if braced for accusation. "Messieurs, madame," Poirot began, his tone courteous but firm. "Monsieur Henshaw has confessed to the murder of Alfred Morse, driven by the need to protect his espionage. The signal Z13 QX7 was his marker, intercepted by Morse and reported to Naval Intelligence. But you, each of you, played a part in the drama that unfolded. Let us clarify your roles, n'est-ce pas?" Graves shifted uncomfortably, his voice a stammer. I didn't know, Mr. Poirot. I swear, I thought Alfred was just obsessed, chasing ghosts in the static. I saw him scribbling, locking his notes away. But I never touched them. I was scared, yes. Scared I'd lose my job if the Navy thought we were messing about. Poirot nodded, his gaze piercing. "Your fear, Monsieur Graves, it kept you silent. You suspected Morse's work was more than routine, yet you said nothing. This silence, it aided the killer, though not by intent." Graves's shoulders slumped, his cap twisting in his hands. "I should have spoken up. I see that." Now Poirot turned to Margaret Vale, whose lips were pressed into a thin line. "And you, madame, your ambition led you to intercept Morse's signals, including Z13. You claimed it was rivalry, but was there more? Did you know the signal's significance?" Vale's eyes flashed, but her voice was steady. "I told you, it was business. Morse's station had the Navy's ear, and I needed an edge. I logged his signals to see if he was slipping up, wasting their funds. That code, it meant nothing to me, just another oddity. I didn't kill him, and I didn't spy for anyone." Poirot studied her, noting the sincerity in her tone, tempered by the pride that drove her. "Bon, your ambition, it is fierce, but not murderous. Yet your silence, like Monsieur Graves's, allowed the shadow to grow." Japp, listening intently, interjected. "So they're clear, then. No part in the murder." Poirot's smile was faint. "Clear of murder, oui, but not of responsibility. Their actions, their inactions, they shaped the path to Morse's death. The truth, it is a mirror, and it reflects all." To complete the case, Poirot insisted on a final call to McCarter at the Home Office, using the inn's telephone. Carter's voice was crisp, tinged with urgency. "Henshaw's confession is a breakthrough, Monsieur Poirot. We've traced his contacts to a network operating out of neutral ports, likely German, though they're careful. Morse's telegrams were our first warning, and his death confirms the threat. We're securing our frequencies thanks to you." Poirot inquired about the alkaloid, and Carter revealed it was a known tool of foreign agents, supplied to operatives for discreet eliminations. "Henshaw was no amateur," Carter added. "You've done us a great service." Back in the common room, Poirot shared the news with Japp, who whistled softly. "A proper spy ring, eh? Morse was a hero in his way, sniffing out their game." Poirot nodded, his expression somber. "A hero, oui, but one who paid the ultimate price. His signal, it was his legacy, and we have honored it." He turned to the window, where the cliffs stood stark against the sea, their secrets now laid bare. As Graves and Vale departed, their relief palpable, Poirot lingered by the fire, his tisane cooling in his hands. The case had been a dance of shadows, fear, ambition, betrayal. But the little grey cells had prevailed, illuminating the truth. "The loose ends, mon ami," he said to Japp. "They are tied, but the cost, it is heavy. A man is dead, and a village it will not forget." Japp clapped him on the shoulder, his grin returning. "You're a marvel, Poirot. Always said so. Now, how about a proper lunch before we wrap this up?" Poirot's smile was faint, his thoughts already turning to the steamer that would carry him back to London. The Phantom's signal had been silenced, its secrets exposed, but the echoes of Morse's courage lingered, a reminder of the fragility of truth in a world of shadows. Chapter 12. The Departure. The afternoon sun cast a golden sheen over St. Albans, its rays piercing the last wisps of mist that had clung to the Cornish cliffs for days. Hercule Poirot stood on the weathered dock, his overcoat buttoned against the lingering sea breeze, his hat tilted just so to shield his eyes from the glare. The steamer Cornish Star, its hull creaking softly, awaited to carry him back to Dover, and from there to the comforts of his London flat. The mystery of Alfred Morse's death unravelled through the cryptic signal Z13QX7 had reached its conclusion with Victor Henshaw's confession, revealing a web of espionage that had cost a man his life. Yet, as Poirot gazed at the restless sea, his grey cells lingered on the case, savouring the clarity of truth while mourning its cost. Inspector Japp, standing beside him, adjusted his bowler hat, his face a mixture of satisfaction and weariness. "Well, Poirot, you've done it again," he said, his voice carrying a rare warmth. "Caught a spy, saved the Navy's secrets, and all with that signal nonsense. I'll never understand how you do it." Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile playing at his lips. "Mon ami, it is not nonsense, but order. The signal, it was Morse's cry for justice, and the little grey cells, they listened. Method, observation. These are the tools of Hercule Poirot." The village of St. Albans, now bustling with the quiet rhythm of daily life, seemed almost untouched by the drama that had unfolded. Fishermen mended nets, gulls wheeled overhead, and the cliffs stood sentinel, their secrets laid bare. Yet Poirot knew the echoes of the case would linger. Leonard Graves's fear, Margaret Vale's ambition, and the chilling precision of Henshaw's betrayal. Each had played their part, and Poirot had woven their threads into a tapestry of truth. As the steamer's whistle sounded, Japp clapped Poirot on the shoulder. "You'll be back, I wager, sniffing out another puzzle before long. Safe travels, Poirot." Poirot inclined his head, his eyes twinkling. "Au revoir, Inspector. The truth, it always calls, and Hercule Poirot, he answers." He boarded the steamer, his small frame a stark contrast to the rugged sailors handling the ropes. Settling into a deck chair, he gazed at the receding cliffs, the naval station a mere speck against the horizon. In his mind, the case replayed like a symphony. Morse's obsession with the phantom signal, the telegrams to Mr. Black, the puncture mark, the alkaloid, and Henshaw's calculated strike. The trap set with the false signal QX7Z13 had been the crescendo, drawing the linguist into the open. The Home Office's confirmation of a foreign network, the chemist's ledger, the villager's sighting, all had aligned, guided by Poirot's relentless pursuit of order. As the steamer churned through the channel, Poirot sipped a tisane, provided by a solicitous steward, his thoughts turning to the future. The shadow of espionage hinted at by Mr. Carter suggested darker currents in Europe, a storm that might soon engulf the world. But for now, St. Albans was at peace, its phantom silenced, its hero avenged. Poirot adjusted his scarf, his gaze fixed on the sea. "The truth," he murmured. "It is a beacon, and Hercule Poirot, he follows its light." The cliffs faded into the haze, and the steamer carried him toward new horizons, where other mysteries awaited the scrutiny of his grey cells.